What do we mean when we talk about the in-between, the nexus of our lives, of our reality? So often when we look back at our lives, we look at the milestone moments, these plateaus and footprints that we leave behind as markers of our life's journey. That only makes up about 20 to 30%. The rest is defined and connected by the in-between. Everything that takes place in between. And this is where the art of the spiritual warrior comes in. We can develop the tools and the means to identify all these different elements in our world and become the alchemists of our lives, peering through the nexus and the prism of our multiverse and drawing forth all that we are into the present now. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. We are here again. It is, it is another Friday. It's another week. I can't believe it's already been another week. I'm going to be honest with you. It has been really fast going, like the days. Then maybe it was just me. Maybe I just had a real busy week. Maybe it went by fast for you too. But here we are again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Wolf's Den. I apologize in advance if I break out into song or dance at any point, because I just finished watching a documentary while I was kind of doing some work and stuff today. I had it in the background. It was a new one on Netflix called Dirty Pop. And it was just kind of about the scandal of the 90s boy band explosion that took place. And I was part of that. I was a 90s kid. So I certainly have Backstreet's Back stuck in my head right now, and I apologize again in advance if I start jamming, because that stuff, it's from childhood. I can't not jam to it. The nostalgia vibrations kick up, and it's just it's fantastic. So welcome, and before we get too deep into it, we're going to start off, of course, with the good feeling vibes. But I would also like to take a moment just to really send some good energy and send some prayers out to a lot of what's taking place out here in BC and between BC and Alberta in particular. I know there's stuff like this happening all over the world, but currently right now where I am is in the midst of this area of what's currently taking place. And a lot of people are displaced. Again, there is incredible amount of destruction, and at the same time there is community showing up for each other and a lot of support and a lot of love and open-heartedness at this time. So I'd like to promote that as much as we're hearing about the scary parts of stuff. Let's also look at some of the really beautiful aspect and the balance that takes place during these times. And as horrific as it may seem, and as much as we want to maybe dive into the whys behind some of this stuff taking place, I think the most important thing is, while we're dealing with fact of the matter stuff, let's try to balance out the polarity as much as we can. We're here to learn about alchemy, and that's transmutation, right? We cannot change the state of how something shows up. If it shows up negative, I can't change that negative into a positive, but I can use that negative to reinforce a positive, and I can take it as part of the formula. And that allows us to actually move forward in a lot of aspects in our lives without having to judge, without having to look at comparison, and actually accepting the contrast of the indifference and the duality of life, the incredible variation that creation takes in all its forms. We don't have to judge it anymore. We can simply allow things to be what they are and use our own presence to actually dictate the course of that influence within our lives. So a lot of heart, a lot of prayer, a lot of support for a lot of the people that are struggling at this time. And let's do our part too, as much as we can. Again, transmute this energy. Let's turn it into something as positive as we possibly can, as beneficial as within our given preference that we wish to achieve. That being said, hi, so welcome back. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I guess we could talk a little bit about, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the story and the moral that of the documentary that I watched today. Um, Lou Pearlman is who it was about, and this guy was the mogul of the 90s when it came to pop industry and the boy bands in particular. Like, you can't name a boy band that came out in the 90s that he didn't have a hand in the development of, and the marketing and the promotion, whatever. He usually was the creator of a lot of this stuff. And it's so interesting to see a story like this of this guy who comes up and he's got a dream while he's a young kid. His nickname was Fat Boy. He was bullied. He felt like the outcast. And as he got older, he ends up finding an environment where he can reimagine himself. He ends up finding a space where not only can he provide himself as and show up and prove himself to himself as something different, but he's also able to offer that opportunity now to other people who he can recognize were in those same similar spots when he was younger. Now, this story is going to get really elaborate. I want to make sure that as I'm expressing things, there's no judgment, there's no sides being taken. This is from a very neutral standpoint, but how I absorbed the information. So this was kind of the background on this guy. And as he gets older, he's kind of got this dream, this aspiration about, I want to be up in blimps, and I want to own blimps, and I want to do this and that. So he starts a company, Transcontinental Airlines, and he specializes in blimp travel. And this was where, back in the day in the 80s, the big McDonald's blimps and all the big corporate blimps, they had their mainstay because of this company, Transcontinental. And eventually what ended up happening was all those big name corporation blimps crashed. Very, very domino effect time frame to each other, very correlated to each other in timing. And there was a lot of insurance money that came from that. And with that insurance money, this guy decides, you know what, I'm gonna start a record label, or I'm gonna go and I'm gonna start managing music talent, because he had started researching some of the industries, and he saw how much, for example, the New Kids on the Block, oh, step by step, ooh baby, oh, I love that song. That song was my jam. He saw the business model that came with that, and he said, I want to get into that industry. So he used the insurance money from the blimp company to start Backstreet Boys, basically, was what it was. He get these kids together, he starts doing talent scouting, he starts doing all this initial buildup of these young men who, at the time, they had jobs at Outback Steakhouse or at Disneyland as tour guides, and just average stuff. And they were looking for an opportunity to make their dreams come true. And then at the same time, there's this network build that comes from that business model of this guy Lou would focus on the relationship building with investors rather than just the business aspect. Again, this is just pieces to the story. So it starts to come off in this imagery of, he's a dream maker, and he's helping millions of people get these or young people get these opportunities to affect millions of people, I should say, and help promote this, in his mind, really good feeling energy with young crowds. It turned out at the time when they were making their biggest push into the industry, they were out in Germany, Backstreet Boys, and they had a big following out there, hadn't developed that same following in the States yet. So as they're starting to make more and make a bigger name for themselves, when they come back to the States, that's when they do the Backstreet's Back, all right, and that whole big tour, and they blew up. Now they're finding out there was like 200 million or something like that raked in from all the sales, raked in from all the tours and merchandising, and they were seeing fractions as artists. They were seeing fractions of that. In their mind, they're thinking, because of how this manager is out promoting things and handling the nights out and this and that, that he's the one that's pocketing all the cash, that he's the one that's got the lion's share of what's coming in for profits. When it turned out that wasn't the case either. It was going, I don't even know, I can't even remember where they said if it was going to the record label or if it just wasn't going to the right channels, right? So at the same time as all this is happening, this dude Lou is also building NSYNC as a band. He's building O-Town. He's building all these new bands. He starts that show back in the day in the 90s, making the band, and it was all about the next big pop group. So he knew the model of what he was doing in this industry. And again, I don't even want to say surface level, on an actual level, he was creating impact in people's lives where they're getting these opportunities they never would have had. They're feeling what it's like to be living these dreams out, and to a certain degree. And then some of them actually getting to fulfill it to incredible degrees. Yet at the same time, there's this kind of behind the scenes thing where this company, Transcontinental, as all this music is happening and they start the record label and blah, 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 he's got this investment deal where when you invest into the company, there's this FDA, or not FDA, but a properly approved seal and insurance backing and blah, blah, blah. And the returns on this investment are supposed to be higher yield than anywhere else you can possibly get. And this was a behind the scenes thing that he was using the music to promote for. So we had these bands and these artists go and perform for people, create networks, start this whole monopoly connection of, yeah, check these guys out. This is what we do. Oh, by the way, if you're interested in the company Transcontinental, we have investment opportunities, blah, blah, blah. So he starts getting people to rake in and invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to hopefully, in their minds, according to this document and the seals and the insurance, get back a higher yield percentage than they would have gotten investing that money anywhere else. And we're not just talking business people, we're talking average people. We're talking people that were trying to increase their grandchildren's college funds and education funds. So they're investing like life savings into this, thinking, oh yeah, this pitch is great and it's properly approved. So everything keeps continuing. And in the music industry side, and he keeps getting investors and keeps building these networks until eventually the lawsuits pile up enough from the music side of things that enough people started to take notice, saying, well, where's this money that he's spending, that he's flaunting around? Where is it coming from? If he's not getting the lion's share from the record label, the way that it apparently was seeming on the books, he's coming off as he's getting less than 30 grand a year, but yet he's spending money in this imagery like he's a billionaire. Where's it coming from? So people started to look deeper into it. And then they found out about this investment thing on the back end of Transcontinental and how that investment was what was funding everything else that he was doing. So all the promotion, all the nights out, all the things that he was using the music industry for to bring more money in from the investors, he was then turning around and spending that money back in the industry as if it was his own money. And this created crazy ripples in, personal relationships, business relationships. Goes to jail after he flees the country, dies in jail. There was a whole big story that, layers upon layers upon layers of different inputs and perspectives. And when it gets to the end of the documentary, we had all the people that were kind of doing interviews through the 3 episodes do a final wrap up sort of testimonial on, what are your thoughts on this guy? And you've got such this mixed bag of reception from it. And I'm sitting there going, isn't this interesting? You hear stories, you hear the facts of the matter on how things were laid out. And yet when we look at the facts of the matter, the perspective on how that's looked at changes our emotional state and our belief system, which actually builds the reality of that fact of the matter circumstance. So in this particular case, fact of the matter was people invested their money with this guy, and he did not invested the way that it was fraudulent investment. And the mixed perceptions were just incredible to see, because you've got these people who did invest their life savings and their grandchildren's education and situations where it was life savings and things like that. And they're going, he's a crook, send him to jail, give him he got 25 years, which was insane to think for a financial crime in some instances, but it was big. So you got the negative side of it. And then there's these people that are coming out saying, I've never known a person with a bigger heart. I've never had someone show up as a friend the way that this guy used to show up as a friend for me. This whole aspect of he touched millions of people's lives and helped build so many people's dreams and create, like, literally part of creating an entire culture of the 90s that succeeded 30 plus years. So it's incredible to see the perception on how an influence or a certain circumstance is simply interpreted, or the reality that is experienced based off of fact of the matter circumstances. And this is where it's so powerful to see our own personal development of accountability. Because when we're accountable for something, the fact of the matter can be whatever the fact of the matter is. The circumstances are what they are. But when we're accountable for how we're receiving that circumstance, how we're putting our own influence and our own expression back into the connectivity and the alchemy of that circumstance, we take away the power that circumstance would potentially have over us. And we say, yes, it's going to be this way. Things are going to be that. It's going to be the way that it's showing up as. But I'm going to handle myself, and I'm going to handle that influence in my field, in my perception of reality and perception of this circumstance. That's all on me. I'm going to take that accountability. I'm not going to pass that responsibility off to the circumstance itself. I'm not going to shirk my own presence or allow an influence to change my perception of presence and definition of that presence without my authority, without my calling of that. So it's really, it just kind of falls back to this big theme that I've been showing up with in my world and in kind of some sessions and conversations with people about accountability. It's one of the most powerful tools that we can use when we truly open up to the vulnerability of who we are, when we show up for things, when we are a part of the conscious awareness of everything is a choice. Everything is a choice. Having something show up in my world may not be a choice. How I receive that, how I choose to interact with that, that's a choice. That's all on me. So, and this is where I think we somewhat get confused when it comes to the stages of manifestation, for example. When we're changing the literal parallel reality that we're experiencing, because that's what I attest manifestation to. It's not bringing something in that's external. It's shifting my own personal awareness and resonance into a frequency of reality where it already exists. Whatever is being attempted to manifest, it already exists. So I simply reattune myself to that frequency. So when it comes to these stages of manifestation in the early portions of it, we tend to look at it from a results only perspective, as opposed to how we're showing up and what is it, that frequency that we're actually holding resonant to. And that's where I really find the biggest power of accountability becoming in, because there's a reflection that comes from that when we show up in every single instance of I'm choosing to be here. Everything that takes place is an indifferent part of creation, but it's a part of the reality that I'm choosing to be attuned to in its frequency, in its resonance. So that means all I have to do is show up. everything else that takes place is a part of my chosen resonant frequency. And if I don't like what's taking place, if it's not within a preferred state, if it's influencing me in a way that's taking me out of that alignment, change my resonance. I can't change the physical matter. I can't do it. It's living its own experience. It's supposed to be the way that it is. It's contrast for the duality of things. My choice is to either reflect that contrast that I don't prefer, or to use it to reinforce a preferred state. It's an incredible tool when we just say, yeah, that's on me. That's all on me. That's my accountability. We have a comment here. Let's check. Cindy, welcome, Cindy. I'm glad you could join us this afternoon. I mean, I don't know if it's afternoon for you. It's this afternoon for me. So thank you for joining me on my afternoon. It's just jumping back to the accountability thing. This is something that I've seen have an immediate effect on so many people in my own world and circles, but on myself too. When I started to really look at the fact of every experience needing to be the way that it shows up, the way that it needs to show up. And it's really on me to dictate the way that I am attuned to how it shows up, to how I accept the alignment of it. I'm always going to accept things for the way that they are, but that doesn't mean that I accept it as an embodiment of who I am. There's a big difference between that. And I find that the way that I really got to this point was going through the stages of finding these new levels of vulnerability, finding these places in my world where I was constantly projecting blame or justification or anything outside of my own personal conduct. And when I was really just honest with myself and vulnerable as hell, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt, I should say, really and truly, those are the keyholes that just lead us right down the corridor, like Indiana Jones, right? There's the boulder coming behind you, and you know when you finish running, you got the treasure, but you had to trigger the trap first. It's very, very similar to that. Go to the spot that you know is scariest, the places that hurt the most. Just remove the judgment of the actual circumstance of the situation, any judgment of self. Simply go back there and know that when we revisit these memories, when we revisit these places of energetic attachment, who we are now is different than who that version of us is that we're visiting in the multiverse. That moment of the right now will always exist in the multiverse. When we take our perception, our memory, our conscious awareness, and we jump back there, our level of attachment is going to dictate how much emotion, energy in motion we're receiving from peering through that window of the multiverse. Our conscious presence, when we go back into that state, viewing those memories, viewing through the prism of the multiverse, our conscious presence is going to be able to actually say, hey, we can change the energy flow here. And then whatever attachment is still there is going to change as well. It's our belief systems and our either accountability or lack thereof. And we have to be very honest and very vulnerable with ourselves. The best way to do that while we're doing these deep analysis of areas where we can take more accountability, find more vulnerability with ourselves, show yourself so much love throughout this process. It is so common in the early stages of being vulnerable with ourselves to just judge and crap all over that. I did this instead of this, and yes, okay, I'm being vulnerable with myself, but what we're actually doing is we're further victimizing. While we're being vulnerable, we're not taking the accountability of owning the actions. We're actually blaming ourselves because of those actions. That's another level of victimizing. When we take accountability for it, when we own it, we say that situation was based out of either a lack of perception, a lack of awareness, a lack of information, whatever. It came from fear, came from anger, came from this, that. It's owning it for simply what it was and how it will always be in the multiverse. The influence that's linked to that through the attachments, that's where we get to be accountable. When we step up, owning those instances and say, here's how I'm going to ensure that that experience has now become a contrast to reinforce my present state moving forward. I either really didn't enjoy that, and it was so far out of my aligned state of preference that I'm going to use it as a blueprint and guideline for what not to do in the future, or it's going to reflect a state of the ignorance that came from that behavior to begin with, and the pattern will continue. But it's all choice. Even when we don't know we're making it, it's still a choice. So, yeah, the early stages of that vulnerability, show yourself as much love as you possibly can. Laugh at your own jokes. Find yourself hilarious. Look in the mirror and tell yourself how beautiful you are. Every single moment that you find an area that you're judging yourself or someone else, reinforce a state of love. Say, I recognize your power and I love you. Because what's happening in those moments of judgment, remembering that when we're casting it outward, it's a reflection of how we're treating ourselves. There's something that's showing up in that presence that we're judging in the moment that is reflective and correlative to something that we're judging about ourselves. It's all within us. It's all part of us, how we're showing up. When we're able to really embody that and own that, every single time we catch ourselves judging and we say, I see you, I recognize you, and I love you. I recognize your power, I respect your power, and I love you. What we're doing is we're addressing that wounded part of ourselves that is linked to whatever is creating that judgment. And we're addressing the wound directly, that little piece that's been hiding away, tucked behind all these walls, and we're showing it love. We're saying, I recognize you. I see you. You don't need to come out here with such aggressiveness and such force and arrogance. You don't need to prove yourself. I see you. I acknowledge you. I respect your power. I love you. Instant transformation the more that you do it. I absolutely promise you. The first few times I started to do it, I realized it was an ego integration, and my ego wasn't so happy to hear that the first couple times, because keeping in mind how we've been conditioned to look at ego, we see ego as this negative part of ourselves, this thing that embodies all the darkness, all the things that we don't like about our characteristics and our behavior, all these things that we need to change, as opposed to kind of looking at it from the perspective that it is us. And to elaborate on it further, that first portion that I just described, how we look at it from the judgmental standpoint of it's all these negatives, it's all the darkness, that's wounded ego. Just what I was referring to before in the contrast of what we're addressing with respecting the power and the I love yous, we're addressing the wound. So when wounded ego is present, or when it's still in our field of characterization and embodiment, it shows up in that manner because we've spent our lives shunning it, treating it like it's less than, saying, I don't want you, ego, you're bad, you don't know what you're doing, making it this separate extension of who we are, and then throwing all of our baggage onto it. So when it does show up, it has to boast its own power. It has to prove itself to the entire world around it, because it hasn't had any reinforcement to say that it's worthy of anything. So it needs to prove that it's worthy. When we look at it from that perspective, we go, wow, that makes a lot of sense when the ego mindset shows up, and we take such arrogance, we take such pride and blood. That's what we relate it to. So if we can honor the fact that it's simply a part of who we are, let's break it down without the wound. Showing up in that presence, in that unconquerable energy, that state of immovable presence, this force, this undeniable force that allows us to draw motivation, strength, empowerment, levels of who we are beyond what we may think we're capable of. That's what I attribute true healed and integrated ego to. A properly balanced ego is going to find itself in a challenging situation and say, I got this. A wounded ego is going to say, everybody, look at me, watch as I do this better than you. It's not about doing it better than anybody else. It's simply having that completely undeniable faith that no matter what situation you get into, you're good. You're going to figure it out. That's ego. That's proper healed, integrated ego. And how I really came to this understanding and practice in my world was through these I love yous, through these I respect your power and I love yous. And like I said early on, because of how we're looked at it, the conditioning that we spent years, the earliest years of our lives treating ego with, the first few times I started doing this in my early 20s, the response I got back was, fuck you. My ego didn't want to hear it. My ego didn't want to hear me opening up and being kind, being accepting, being loving to it. It didn't know how to respond. It was pissed. How am I going to spend my whole life up to that point treating it like crap and then just show up out of the blue and say, hey, I respect you, I love you? So there's a couple different ways that you can approach it from that instance. You could sit down, you could have a conversation with your wounded ego, your shadow self, and explain the transformative perception and approach that you'll be taking. That wasn't the way that I did it. I just kept showing up. I said, that's the response you get. I know, I understand, I get it. I wasn't going to argue it. I treated it that way. So the only way in my mind that I saw at the time to really fix things wasn't going to be an explanation. It was simply going to be the consistency of I'm showing up. I can't apologize enough. I can't explain enough. Spending a lifetime treating a portion of myself as less than. So the only thing that I should be doing in that instance is showing it how worthy it is and how wrong I had been up to that point, treating it in that manner. So it just switched and I just kept doing it more and more and more. I respect you, I love you. I respect your power, I love you. Respect your power, I love you. And it would show up at random times. I'd be on my way to work and I'd, see the bus passing by or somebody sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus with me. And just these things, I would have my own personal turmoil and it would jump out as judgments and projections and trying to, again, reinforce that state of worthiness within my wound. So I brought that state of worthiness. I provided it for myself, so much so that when the rebuttals, when those talkbacks stopped, the ego stopped yelling back at me. It stopped cursing back at me, but it just kind of went silent. It wasn't in full acceptance mode just yet, but he was okay with everything. He was just letting it out. He goes, fine, you're just going to be that way. I'm not going to change you. So what I did push it to the next level was I was just throwing I love yous out all over the place. And I mean, non-stop. When I was waiting for the bus, I made it a game. When the traffic light would stop and the cars would build up at the light, as they would pass by, I said, every single person in every single car gets an I love you. Every single one of them. I love you and bless you, bless you, bless you, bless you. I love you, I love you, I love you, bless you, bless you, bless you. May you be blessed. That was one of my big sentences at the time. So that was a game, was trying to pick out all the people that were in the cars and if a bus came by that wasn't my bus, whoo-wee, that was like a freaking auctioneer. And I'm just running off the may you be blessed and I love yous. And I'm like, when I would get to work, I'd put it on the worksheet for the day where I'd write the specials and I'd write, prep lists and the notes for the front house and blah, blah, blah. And then at the bottom, I'd say, may you be blessed. Every single where that I could, I was throwing it out. And I realized how much of an impact it started to have because either people were accepting in that very high vibe state and going, wow, thank you, I love you too, may you be blessed, and now we get to exchange and reflect that vibe back to each other. Or I saw the contrast, and I saw a lot of contrast in the bars. I'll tell you that, when I was working in the bar industries and I would have I love yous and may you be blessed posted up on the walls, the wounded response from people was, I mean, at the time, mind blogging. But now I go, yeah, okay, I see why that happened. But it was insane to see how just doing that for people, saying, I love you, may be blessed, I love you, may be blessed, triggered that wounded state. And once I got it, I just was able to correlate it back to how my ego responded the first few times that was genuinely presented. And I go, oh yeah, that's your shadow. That's how wounded you are, that you can't even hear a positive affirmation or receive love from somebody without casting it back and reflecting the chaos state that they've chosen to embody, whether consciously or unconsciously. And when we say it's an unconscious choice, I say that because you're not choosing otherwise. If you are unconsciously standing in a vibratory resonance and not taking the accountability to shift that state when it's not being beneficial or valuable or within a preferential alignment, that's a choice. I don't care if you chose to be in that place. Oh, I didn't choose to be here, it just happened. Great, you're not choosing to leave it either. That's still a choice. And it always, once we're able to just be real vulnerable like that, we go, oh yeah, that's on me. That's on me. I can do something about that. The details tend to work themselves out, but only in accordance with our anchored state. Like how consistent are we staying in that vibratory state as we're dealing with all the external influences from everything and everyone else in this shared plane of existence, as well as our own shift. We're always shifting through our parallel realities, our versions of ourselves, while we're running thoughts, going into memories, shifting our emotional state. This is how we change the frequency resonance that we're aligned with for the reality that we're experiencing. So choosing and not choosing, it's all based on us. Find this accountability, find the vulnerability within yourself to be able to show all the love that's necessary to reinforce your preferred state of experience, using that as the guiding post, the antenna, to be able to deviate from everything else swirling around us and standing firm, present in our own space. It's really, really powerful magic, powerful presence, and these are the lessons that I feel like we should be getting taught in school. Don't get me wrong, there's, some value to some of the stuff, but I mean, we can easily teach something like history, for example, through the community. And I would almost prefer that it get taught through the community, through, groups like elders gatherings, things like that, where we're getting firsthand knowledge from not only the people that were there to experience it, but it's within our realm, immediate space of shared vicinity. So when we're learning about history from across the world, I don't have a problem with learning about history from across the world. But when I learn about that history, I want to go to that space to learn that history. I want to be present with the land as I'm hearing these stories and be able to correlate my own authentic vibration that I'm picking up from the information that we hear. Because unfortunately, and this is my biggest thing with school systems, which is what started this tangent, is the information is so marginalized and very monopolized. It's within a range of information being taught the way they want it to be taught and how they want us to learn. And there's science, there's formulas, there's actual record of true analyzation and psychology going into how the entire system and how it's received, all of that. So what I'd like to be able to do is switch out. I don't have a problem with schools. I have a problem with the idea of, I don't have a problem with the idea of schools. I have a problem with, again, this monopolized system of execution. So we could be able to take that kind of institute and model it after these types of lessons, things like accountability, things like learning about vulnerability, natural healing, the stuff that's been around for longer than pharmaceuticals, stuff that pharmaceuticals based its science off of, learning about the natural medicines, learning about the land that you live on, learning about the development of a personal shift in oneself as we grow through the different stages of life. You know, that contrast of, this is who I am, and if I go against it, I'm being dishonest to myself, as opposed to knowing that we're always changing. We're always going to be growing and adapting and increasing our capacity for awareness. So to limit ourselves into one state of, this is who I am and I'm never going to change, you know, breaking out of that through these adolescent stages, it's tough. So to be able to offer guidance through this, through the masculine and the feminine development of humanity, right? These are the things that I think we should be learning in school. It would be interesting to see how things are going to shift in the coming systematic changes. You know, we're already seeing how drastically everyone is currently responding to the landscape of everything from education to employment to finances to politics. This is a global shift, and I mean, don't get me wrong, we've had it in certain areas, certain sections across the globe throughout all of humanity, basically. But right now, it's almost like it's a collective thing where everything that we're kind of dealing with in our own way, based on our culture, is happening in its own way over here on the planet, and over here on the planet, over the whole system's crumbling down. And part of that comes from the fact of what the system thought was its biggest strength within its unity is now turning into its biggest downfall. And this is one of the interesting things about operating as a collective when you're not operating authentically, because when you have different pieces with different agendas that are all interlinked and connected within one another, and nothing is being transparent between not only the different working components, but then with whatever it's interacting or engaging with, eventually that system is going to crumble. It cannot operate. It's the same thing with telling a lie over and over and over and over again. Yeah, okay, eventually it becomes your truth, but your truth doesn't mean that that lie won't get tangled up in the story of the fact that your truth doesn't line up with somebody else's experience of it. And I'm not even talking about the contrast of perceptions. I'm talking about looking at the fact of the matter of the circumstances and simply ignoring the fact of the matter. On the difference of perception will always exist, but to ignore the fact of the matter that creates the difference of perception in the first place, you're flat out choosing to be dishonest at that point and deceitful. I'm almost losing my train of thought, so let's get back to something that it's the layers upon this stuff as I find myself doing more research and doing more personal development. I find some of the tangents lead me to tangents, and then I go, wait, how did I get here? And it's like walking through the forest without leaving breadcrumbs behind, almost. But the good part is, wherever I end up in the forest, I know how to build shelter. So it may not be the prettiest thing in the world, but you know, I learned how to strip bark, and I learned how to pick the good wood, and learned how to make the ties out of stuff. So I mean, I'm good. I could figure it out. Drawing back to that accountability thing, right? So I guess to get kind of closer to the end, we got about 15 minutes left. So some of the biggest, I guess, jumps that I found for myself within accountability came from the reflection that I got to see in the world around me. Because, and I've talked about this in past shows, when we're showing up just in our own space, just for ourselves, we're giving everything else and everyone else the space to do the exact same. Going back to that authentic state of love, or may you be blessed and I love yous, we don't always have to speak those words. When we embody that frequency, it simply shows up when we show up. So when we get to that really authentic presence of, I'm just holding my own space, you get to show up how you're going to show up, we'll get that reflection back as if we were speaking the I love yous to the wounded ego. You'll be able to see very clearly within that state of person, by just showing up in a full presence of authentic I love you, whether they're reflecting the chaos within, or they're reflecting that I love you and that high positivity back. And we don't have to fall into a judgment pattern. We don't have to fall into this, looking over our backs and almost paranoia about life. It just becomes about how we are showing up as individuals. And it creates the biggest ripple effect and just drops a boulder into the lake, and you see the waves, and it just keeps going and going and going. And, we use the metaphor, I've heard the metaphor used, drop the rock into the pond to create the ripple. I'm at the point now of shifting into and promoting the shift into, instead of being the rock, I want to become the waterfall. I want that constant presence, that stream, that sustainable flow that creates an ever expanding, infinite ripple. That flow that comes from the waterfall not only creates a ripple, it creates a river. It creates its own flow from that point. That's the consistency that I want to tap into. I don't want to have to create this piece by piece separate extension, even though there's the value in, we have to start there, being the pebble, being the rock. I'm at the place now of shifting into that consistency, because I understand the value of that consistency. I understand that is what creates the sustainability in shifting, always, every single day, waking up and knowing that the moment that I awake, I'm going to be in a different presence of perception of reality, meaning experience of reality, than I was before I went to sleep. So I have to bring that back, be the waterfall. Every single day, find that presence of being the waterfall. That absolute sustainability of accountability. Ooh, it's powerful. Ooh, I like that. Let's check out comments here real quick. We got any no comments. That's okay. That's all right. Hope everyone's just enjoying the show. That's all we can do. I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of it. I'm a little talked out. I don't know how much more I got to say on the subject. We kind of covered it pretty clearly. I think that there's something that comes with the avoidance of accountability, that for some reason we built up a perception of safety within. And I don't know if that comes from this belief in higher powers. I don't know if it comes from a trauma that's linked to provision at some point within our lives. But when I look at a consistent pattern of lack of accountability, what I'm seeing is somebody or something retreating so deeply into themselves that they're expecting something else to deal with the scenario, to fix the scenario, whether it's a trauma, whether it's an external circumstance. It doesn't matter. It's the point of that withdrawal, that avoidance, because it's not just withdrawing from the scenario itself. It's actually withdrawing from your own personal power, knowing that scenario was presented to you because it was within our frequency at that time. We never give ourselves, as a part of life, anything that we're unable to handle. We only convince ourselves that we're not able to handle it. So convince yourself otherwise. Take the accountability and say, oh, I guess I have the power to do something about this. Whether it's going to influence me in a way that I'm going to be able to take and create an echo effect throughout the rest of my life, or I'm going to deal with this situation in a shared reality perspective that's going to affect somebody else. Either which way, we're taking that presence of accountability shows that we aren't waiting or allowing for something else to shift that for us. And I feel like when that's a consistent standard for somebody, there's wounds within themselves that they're not looking at, for starters. But I also find that there's a story of some kind, a justification or a belief system. There is a narrative of some form that told them they're incapable of doing something about it. So it's a reflection of not only how we're treating ourselves, but then saying, not only I'm incapable of doing this, I'm so incapable that even when it's something I don't prefer and something that's out of my alignment, I'm still going to allow it to dictate how I feel, how I'm receiving this, the entire reception of my experience. It gets the power to do that now. These are the results that I feel when we don't show up to take our own personal accountability. And having lived in different variances of having that experience and having that perception, I got to tell you, it's not my jam. There was nothing of value that I took out of justifying everything. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't look at the situation and try to find a deeper understanding. There's very little that I do and experience in my life that I'm not able to find that deeper layer compound and construct to it. So much so that I used to actually annoy past partners with that, where they say, it seems like you've got a reason for everything. And I say, well, I don't think of it like that. It's not like I'm intentionally doing that. My mind just understands that here's the surface layer, here's what it's related to. It always comes in that bigger package for me. But that being said, there's just certain times within the expression of that narrative where the depth is not received, or it's not, I want to put this in a way, being real with ourselves doesn't mean that we're not looking at the actual explanation of something, but understand that those details are irrelevant to the choice that we're making based on how we're showing up in that situation. And I hope that makes sense, because everything that comes as part of that package, when we make the decision of what state of resonance we're holding for ourselves, which affects the frequency of the reality we're experiencing, everything else is just part of that package. It's details of living in that frequency. So I'm not going to put my focus onto the details. I'm going to put my focus onto, as I'm living in this frequency of reality and I'm going through these details and these different experiences, how am I showing up? How am I feeling the support, the conduit, the symmetry and synergy of these experiences in my conscious state of choice as I'm showing up through all the details of the experience? That's the thing that dictates whether or not I'm shifting in or out of a preferred state. It's not the details themselves. It's me showing up, and what's the synergy of me showing up? How consciously in alignment of that am I utilizing everything? And the more that we are able to develop some of these tools that we talk about, things like accountability, contrast of experience to reinforce a preferred state, that shows how highly, I mean, I guess we can use the word mastered. It shows how highly mastered you are showing up for yourself, which is then affecting the world around you. it goes to this, it was a post that I did too, that actually wraps it up really well. There's a guy doing a presentation. I wish I could remember his name because it was a big name. It's just not coming to me right now. He was doing a presentation and he says, you know, I used to have this thing with my wife where, so oh, I'll take care of you and you take care of me. And it's such a problematic statement. It's such a problematic statement because it takes away all personal accountability. Something wrong happens. Well, you said you would take care of me. You said you would take care of me. It's your fault that this, and then on the other end of it, builds up resentment. And I mean, on both ends, it builds up resentment. Resentment's just a part of a lack of accountability. He switched that statement and he said, you know, I no longer say you take care of me and I'll take care of you. We got each other. It's I'll take care of me for you. You take care of you for me. And when I heard that, I said, okay, there's a perception that I know many people are going to hear that on that still even correlates to, well, you're still doing it only for the other person. And when you're doing something for somebody else, it opens up that possibility of resentment building up, of projection, of lack of accountability. A lot of these elements that are all correlated to that lack of accountability. The way that I heard that sentence and the way that it resonates for me now, because of all of these different steps and layers and pathways that I've taken to understand within myself how I'm treating myself and how that reflects in my world. When I hear a statement of, I'll take care of me for you, that doesn't mean that when I'm making a decision, I'm making a decision with somebody else in mind. Yeah, I'm still going to be compassionate and considerate and empathetic, but I'm doing it for what's best for me, knowing that when I am in my best and highest state of alignment, it will inevitably ripple out to everyone in my circle and the world around me. So when I'm taking care of me as my partner, you will inevitably receive the best of me because I am taking care of myself and I'm doing what's best for me, affecting how it is received for you as my partner. So again, this accountability thing goes so far beyond just telling the truth for ourselves or things like that. You know, it is literally, the way I see it, a generational, foundational tool of development for how we are going to affect every single person we encounter, experience we go through in life, child that we have, grandchild, any lineage that we're part of. Our accountability, our presence is the biggest thing that we can contribute as a part of our lives. I hope this has been a great show for everybody today. I hope you guys enjoyed the talk. You know, keep showing yourself this love, keep showing yourself this incredible desire to find the best version of you and share that with the world around you. I'm so glad to be a part of it. So glad that I can share my own journey on that with you guys. And I really look forward to coming back next week and new topic, new stuff. Maybe we'll start going over some meditation stuff that I have. Maybe we'll do that. We'll see. We'll see. The time will tell. The week shall tell. All right, everybody. Love you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to get outside and enjoy some of the sunshine before some of this rain comes and help some of the fires that we've been dealing with. So thanks, guys. Thank you, Cindy. Have a great weekend. Take care.